My Jeep YJ project is coming along. I have the 5.3, the Chevy bell housing, AX15 transmission, and NP231 transfer case in the frame and mounted up. Installing it went very straightforward using my overhead crane, and everything seemed to line up just as it did before I took it apart a few months ago. I have the exhaust mounted right now, just temporarily, to make sure everything is still as I left it, and I have to install an O2 sensor in both of these tubes, one on this side and one on the opposite side. Before I put those in, I wanted to have everything back together to make sure there was no problems with clearance. Speaking of clearance, the notch I made in the motor mount gives me plenty of room for the flange. So I'm glad I was able to make that work. However, I really wish I would have just turned this a few degrees to keep this tab from being so close. It's still gonna work okay, but oversight on my part. The transmission and bell housing went together well. I used an adjustable pivot ball for the release arm, and that made all the difference from the last time I had this mounted. The adjustable pivot ball back here was able to bring this release arm closer forward to where the slave cylinder is for the clutch, and I have a good amount of free play. About a 1/16 of an inch at the pressure plate comes out to around 1/8 of an inch here at the end of the arm. So as the clutch breaks in and eventually wears out, I'll still have enough free play. And if I need to remove some of that, I can always lengthen this this arm here. And the spring keeps the tension from the release lever back on the slave cylinder. This is a Novak slave cylinder. The only modification I had to make to my Chevy bell housing was to make clearance for this shoulder here. Because originally the casting is not flat where the bolt is, and a big enough area to cover for the whole bracket. But I was able to pull that off with just a die grinder. There's no issues for clearance on this side with the exhaust. The only thing I have to be cognizant of is the heat from the exhaust pipe near the oil pan. And it's pretty close. It's within a few inches all the way around the bottom. And I have a couple options. I can either wrap that to keep the temperature down under here. That would be the first option if it's an issue. And the second option is to install an oil cooler. I'd rather not do that. If I don't have to, I'd rather just keep it without the oil cooler. However, if I find out that this is a problem, I'll have to do that. I won't know if that's going to be the case until I actually run the engine and see how it works. So the first thing I'll do is probably get these ceramic coated to keep the temperature down. If it still gets too hot, then I'll wrap the exhaust, and after that it's still an issue, I'll run the oil cooler. I hate to do it in that order because I want to put the radiator in and be done, but if I have to, I'll probably run an external oil cooler instead of having a loop inside the radiator. And if I do it that way, I could even run the oil cooler underneath the tub with an electric fan. I prefer not to do it that way, but we'll see how that comes. All the front suspension is wrapped up. Sway bar, torsion bar, steering stabilizer, and steering linkage, heavier duty steering linkage. A lot of off-roaders prefer to remove the sway bar and the torsion bar, but since I don't plan on doing much off-roading with this, I wanted to keep it all. And if I notice that it is too stiff, or if the handling is that bad, it's not too bad to remove the sway bar. These are actually disconnectable if I really wanted to, but wanted to keep this track bar, the torsion bar, because I'm afraid of having bump steer on the highway. I hope that should keep the geometry for the steering linkage in check. Coming around the back of the Jeep, I have the Novak transfer case bracket installed. I still need to do some work on this, as well as a new seal here. And I also need to configure some type of micro switch for low range to send the signal to the 5.3 computer, so the computer knows that the truck is not driving as fast as it seems, so the fuel mapping works out okay. Since this is a 40-tooth, I think 40-tooth Halifax gear inside the NP231, I should be able to use a regular GM pickup to get the speed signal over to the computer. The rear exhaust I have mocked up again just to make sure I do have enough clearance to everything, and it looks like I'm going to be okay. I haven't yet decided if I'm going to ceramic coat all of the exhaust or just the Y pipe. Speaking of, I need to make a cut here and put a flange right in this area. This way when I go to install it, the Y pipe is separate from the rest of the exhaust. Also, if I decide to have the Y pipe powder coated, ceramic coated, none of the rubber seals will be in the furnace for the powder coating. So maybe from here back will just be painted with high temperature paint, and then from there forward will be all ceramic coated, including the headers. This is the original fuel tank from the YJ. I cleaned it with just soap, detergent, and degreaser, and it cleaned up really well. There's no, there wasn't any really weird varnish or anything inside the fuel tank, so it was not a big deal to clean. I did have some soft spots on the skid plate, so I welded some patches on, blended them together, and then painted it with the same Raptor liner I used underneath the tub. And there's the Ford 8.8. The next step on the chassis is to start working out the fuel lines and the brake lines. And I'll be working on that in the next few weeks, as well as finishing up the exhaust. And then once those are done, and I have a rear drive shaft, I'll be able to put the tub on the frame and continue with the assembly. There's no weight back here now because the fuel tank is empty and there is no tub on it. And I'm a little nervous because it seems like from when I mocked this up earlier, the pinion angle was a little bit low. But once I put weight on the frame, I hope it sinks maybe a ½ inch or an inch, and that should make enough difference. From this angle, it looks okay, but it seems like it's maybe 2 or 3 degrees too low. I prefer not to run shims underneath the brackets if I don't have to. So as I have the drive shaft made, I'll see how this works out. I'm done painting everything. The tub came out pretty good. There's a few things that didn't come out as well as I would have hoped, but overall, I chose this color for a variety of reasons, and one of those was to help a novice like myself hide some of my mistakes. It is a cool color though. You don't see much of this, and it does make it look older, which is what I was going for. It'll be a YJ, but I think it really should fool most people, except for the roll bar. That's a giveaway that it's a newer Jeep. And I have all the parts, body parts finished up. The grille, the doors, tailgate, windshield frame, fenders, and hood over here on this rack. I sanded everything and buffed it one time with compound. So once I build it all and put it together, and these parts are more solidly affixed to the Jeep, I'll polish it with a good machine polish and take my time. Right now, today I'm working on the heating and cooling. There's a lot of videos about different methods to clean this and rebuild them. And I'm following advice that I saw online for Mike at Project Rowdy. He does a really good job of going through the heating and cooling system. So if you have any questions, check those videos out. And here's all the parts I'm just working on. Cleaning and organizing, painting, and I have to make new seals for all these baffles too. This here is my shelf of old parts, trying to keep it as organized as possible, which is tough when you have a project like this to keep things organized. Well, that's where we're at now, and hopefully by the time I make my next video, I'll have all the plumbing done, have the exhaust mounted up and finished, put the rear drive shaft in, and on that next video, I'll be able to put the tub on the frame, and then we're really making some progress. Well, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know.